Welcome back, marvelous gamers. Let's talk about the Super Nintendo Entertainment System, or the Super Famicom as Japan called it, that made it to North America all the way back in '91. Its Mode 7 graphics allowed for dynamic scaling and rotation effects, creating immersive gameplay experiences. It also included shoulder buttons on its controller, something we see in modern controller designs to date. While the Super Nintendo would go on to host a rich library of iconic titles, today we're diving deep into its archives with the goal of showing off some of its hidden gems that didn't quite get the recognition they deserved. We advise you to dust off your controllers and retro consoles because by the end of today's video, you're definitely going to want to fire up this bad boy and give a few of these titles a go. Demon's Crest, 1994. Demon's Crest depicts the series of events that occurred when 6 magical stones fell from the sky. The demon realm felt the stones' presence and fell into anarchy. The red demon, Firebrand, manages to collect all 6 stones, only to have 5 of them stolen by his arch-nemesis, Phalanx, while he's wounded from his previous battle. When we jump into the gameplay, the realm has been taken over by Phalanx and Firebrand has been imprisoned. Players must break free and retrieve the stones. This mild RPG plays more like a platformer with Metroidvania elements, and you spend time navigating 6 primary levels that you revisit and rediscover upon obtaining new stones. While you start with abilities like Fire Breath, Flight, and wall crawling, you also unlock new ones with every stone. Though criticized over its short duration and its secret items lacking significance, the degree of depth and the artistic touch to the action-adventure genre are sure to have you hooked. The graphics on this game and its complexity make it a must-play. Metal Warriors, 1995. The next one is a run-and-gun side-scroller crafted by LucasArts and Konami. Metal Warriors serves as an action platformer and takes place in 2102. The United Earth government has been fending off attacks from the Dark Axis group, led by vicious dictator Venkar Amon. Earth's only hope now is the Metal Warriors, a group of kick-ass fighters in combat mech suits who strive for freedom. You get to play Lieutenant Stone and take control of 6 types of combat suits. Each of these packs has got its own unique mechanics and arsenal. Moreover, each of these comes with a backpack and allows you to collect explosive power-ups like rocket launchers, mines, and grenade launchers. Though commonly misinterpreted to be a Cybernator sequel, this isn't the case. In fact, in many ways, Metal Warriors is better. The cutscenes are beautiful, and the pixel art is unique, with uncluttered graphics. It's also highly praised for giving players the ability to leave the combat suits and fight or explore as humans. The classic simple controls with challenging difficulty levels combination took this one far, though often overlooked in comparison to Cybernator. Sunset Riders, 1991. Yet another side-scrolling, run-and-gun Konami title. This one takes you to America's old Western environments as a bounty hunter collecting bounties. Sunset Riders, while it didn't offer much of a narrative, packed a challenge-heavy arcade fun experience. The fusion of Italian spaghetti Western depictions and 1950s Hollywood depictions of the Old West make this a refreshingly wild ride. The resulting environments were beautiful, and as players cleared these immersive stages and their iconic bosses, they forgot about the sillier things like blue horses or neon bullets. As far as gameplay goes, Sunset Riders had you play as one of 4 bounty hunters: Steve, Commando, Bob, and Billy. Steve and Billy allowed you to play with revolvers, while Bob had a rifle and Commando a shotgun. The bonus system in co-op mode had a lot of players raging, since only the player who dealt more damage to the level boss would receive it. The animations, sound, and bright, colorful environments were matched well with the imaginative character designs and the light sense of humor. The fans went crazy when this perfectly paced arcade experience with varied gameplay was made available to enjoy on SNES consoles. Shadowrun, 1993. A video game adaptation of the tabletop RPG of the same name, Shadowrun plays like a cyberpunk fantasy action RPG. The plot loosely follows the events of the first Shadowrun novel, Never Deal with a Dragon, and is set in Washington 2050. It opens with our hero, Jake Armitage, being assassinated. When a mysterious shapeshifter appears and casts a spell over Jake, he loses his memories and wakes up in the morgue. When he comes to his senses, players must investigate and shed light on the events leading up to the attempt on his life and discover who he was saved by and why. The gameplay adds the original tabletop statistic elements to this one as you control Jake and traverse the isometric world. All your in-game actions, be it shooting, using magic, interacting with NPCs or objects, or examining items, are executed using a cursor. The game even presents its own hacking sequences when you take a break from the reflex-demanding combat. Interactions primarily rely on the concept of keywords that you pick up from dialogues and carry forward to future conversations to uncover additional information about particular keywords. This one was way ahead of its time. A truly groundbreaking game with a unique noir story that fell through the cracks with time, especially due to its low shipping numbers. Captain Commando, 1991. In a futuristic metro city, 2026, Captain Commando fights alongside his trusty squad mates, Mummy Commando, Ninja Commando, and Baby Commando, to rid not just the city, but the entire galaxy of crime. While you play as one of the commandos, facing you are the super criminals and their lowly thugs. Captain plays like a standard hero, using his gloves that allow him to shoot fire and electric bolts. Ninja uses a sword, Mummy a pair of knives, and Baby is a super genius in a robotic suit. Think of this one as a crazed, more jacked-up final fight. In more ways than one, given the common universe and similar gameplay mechanics, its resemblance to Final Fight was also the reason behind it being overlooked. However, this one's far better. The number of environment settings it takes players through is insane. Be it the streets, an aquarium, a circus, an old bank, a museum, or a spaceship, Captain Commando had you fighting there. The vast enemy designs that this title packs are no joke either. You fought all sorts of evil, ranging from Neanderthals to ninjas, and all of these were challenging in their own ways. ActRaiser, 1991. To say that ActRaiser went heavy on the religious side of things is an understatement. This hybrid platformer was a city builder that had you playing the role of God. Your godly protagonist, the Master, loses a battle against the Evil One and wakes up hundreds of years later to discover that evil forces have taken over all of the land and turned the common people. As people lost faith over the years, you lost your powers and must regain them by defeating the Evil One's 6 lieutenants, each of which controls a part of the world. After the 6 are dealt with, players go on to battle Tanzra. While this is a hybrid game, it's a little difficult to explain how. While some of the game is a 2D demon-slaying platformer, the other part of it is a city-building simulator. But at the same time, you only direct the common folk on where to build while you clear up the land by shooting demons or removing obstacles. The main goal is to protect your city and reach its maximum population. Sadly, ActRaiser could have done far better by letting players have more control over the city building. But that's as far as its shortcomings go. The combination of its different playforms and its hypnotic atmosphere makes this an enjoyable adventure. Weapon Lord, 1995. With its 7 playable warriors, each with their unique lethal weapons and combat styles, Weapon Lord belongs to the Street Fighter side of arcade games while still doing things very differently. We'll get to how in a minute. The story talks about a demon lord who encounters a prophet. When the prophet tells this ruler about foreseeing his death at the hands of a child born on the warrior's moon, the demon lord pays no heed to the advisors telling him to commit mass infanticide. Rather, this honorable warrior welcomed the challenge and hosted a grand tournament of champions. Getting back to what it does differently, for starters, Weapon Lord surpasses even Mortal Kombat when gore and bloodshed are brought into question. 2D fighting might look similar to Street Fighter or Mortal Kombat, but the story here is much deeper and more immersive. While the unique combat mechanics and the fatality system were great, the disadvantage these brought to less skilled players was far too significant. Weapon Lord fell victim to an unfortunate release time and was in the market following Sega's Saturn and right before the original PlayStation, which meant that it didn't get much time under the sun. Zombies Ate My Neighbors, 1993. When a deranged scientist by the name of Dr. Tongue unleashes his castle's monstrous and bizarre creations on surrounding neighborhoods, all residents are left vulnerable. Concerned friendly neighborhood teens, Zeke and Julie, witness the invasion. They take it upon themselves to get armed to the teeth with an interesting choice of weapons and take to the backyards and front porches to fight back and put an end to the Doctor's madness. While it doesn't seem very challenging till you beat a level or two, this game gets really hard, really quick. You roam the maze-like levels, rescuing civilians and either dodging or killing the monsters you encounter. There's also a 2-player mode where players can play as both Zeke as well as Julia. The weapons system shines bright and offers a broad variety while incorporating strategic elements into it. The visuals are vivid and detailed, while the music feels like an homage to cult classic horror films. The best part, however, is the way the little things add up. The way you can shoot rockets at locked doors to open them if you don't have the key is an example of this. Even with all its light-hearted, fun gameplay, not everyone appreciates this game because of its goofy approach and tongue-in-cheek humor. The Legend of the Mystical Ninja, 1991. The Legend of the Mystical Ninja combines top-down action RPG elements with its intense beat-em-up gameplay in side-scrolling levels. You control Kid Ying and Dr. Yang in their hometown, Oedo. While looking into supernatural occurrences at a local temple, the duo encounters a ghost lady and fights her. The lady reveals herself to be Kurobe, a ninja cat, and is actually in need of help. Following the encounter, they embark on a journey across feudal Japan that ultimately leads to rescuing a princess. Though it's a well-received, loved game, the newcomers might not like what's before them. While there's a lot of gameplay styles, and one might believe that there's something for everyone here, this isn't always enough. To those who have a more open-minded approach to new games, however, this one packs a fun and easygoing sense of humor in the way it handles the narrative. The Legend of the Mystical Ninja flexes the Super Nintendo scaling ability with some extremely detailed sprites. We're talking beautiful graphics alive with colors, along with an authentic Japanese soundtrack and challenging enough levels to keep you playing. Blackthorn, 1994. The story of Blackthorn begins 20 years before the game's main timeline, when the ruler of planet Tool, Thoros, faces a dilemma over which son to appoint as heir to the throne. When he's unable to choose, he commits suicide in the presence of his sons, and his body splits into the Light Stone and the Dark Stone. With each son holding a stone, they form kingdoms of Khard-Rasul and Androth. When the monster-ridden former attacks the latter, the ruler of Androth sends his son Kyle to Earth with the stone to ensure their safety. 20 years later, grown-up Kyle is confronted by a wizard from his past and must now return to Tool to save his people and defeat Sorolak, a Khadra usurper. This cinematic platformer was often compared to Flashback from 1992 and was declared to be slower in terms of pacing, which is surprising given that it emphasizes action over puzzle solving. This lightweight puzzle solving might make it a tad less intriguing to play. Nonetheless, what you get is a heap of atmosphere with a solid graphical overhaul that even managed to make it as a 16-bit game that survived a 32-bit conversion. Play control on offer was better than quite a few titles on the market at the time, and the smooth animation and sound design, paired with the complex gameplay, made playing Blackthorn quite fun. Total Carnage, 1992. For those who loved Smash TV, Total Carnage, starring Captain Carnage and Major Mayhem, was a spiritual successor. Both our playable heroes are members of the Doomsday Squad and fight to put an end to the reign of a dictator by the name of General Arkboob. This retro twin-stick shooter took to a top-down multi-directional gameplay style and had you fighting the General's mutant army while rescuing prisoners of war across 3 different stages, before you face the bosses at the end of each stage. Stage obstacles and enemies make you hold on to your limited lives. This one was better enjoyed and easier when played in a co-op mode. The environments here are inspired by the Persian Gulf War from a year before the game's release. The presence of a password mechanic allowed you to warp your character to any location in the game, which made things quite interesting. Moreover, it even allowed you to use explosives in the fight against the mutant army and their large weapons. In spite of its plain awesomeness, the resemblance to Smash TV, along with the mediocre sound effects, made this one lack freshness. The amazing graphics and the fun factor were as strong as ever though. Joe and Mac, 1991. Released for arcades and later ported to the Super NES and more, Joe and Mac was a platformer set in a bunch of creative prehistoric levels. A bogus bunch of Neanderthal nerds raided Joe and Mac's native village and either abducted or scared off all the cave babes. The intro goes, "Now that all the cave babes are out there somewhere, lost and lonely, it's up to Joe and Mac to get 'em back." Within its single player and 2 different co-op modes, Joe and Mac has you control the cavemen and fight dinosaurs or Neanderthals while clearing obstacles. It's really a shame that this had certain issues with controls. The jump attacks in particular were an important mechanic that felt unreliably wonky. The music, too, seemed a bit unpleasant at times. The interesting level design, on the other hand, is only made better with the weaponry available to you. With clubs, boomerangs, flints, stone wheels and more, Joe and Mac was surely the kind of game you'd fall in love with while embracing its flaws. Goof Troop, 1993. Before a young Shinji Mikami went on to create his masterpiece, the Resident Evil franchise, he worked with Capcom to develop a game based on Goof Troop, a popular TV cartoon starring Goofy and his son, Max. The story here is as Goofy himself. While the father-son duo is out on a fishing expedition, they see Pete and PJ aboard a pirate ship, abducted. The pirates mistook Goofy's Pete for their captain, Keelhaul Pete, and Pete took a liking to the pirate adventure, so he pretended to be the captain. During this chaotic rescue mission, players pick between Goofy or Max in the single-player mode or players both in the co-op. This top-down adventure puzzle-solving title charges you with defeating pirate scum and clearing obstacles by throwing or kicking things like barrels or bombs and using simple but handy gadgets like the grappling hook or the bell. Sure, the challenge it offered was that of a low level and the gameplay duration was short, but this gem brings a certain simplicity to its puzzles and action that holds true to the cartoonish nature and makes for an amazing, enjoyable co-op session with your friends. Saturday Night Slam Masters, 1993. Yet another arcade port by Capcom. Saturday Night Slam Masters is a traditional wrestling game with a traditional Capcom feel, featuring legendary manga artist Tetsuo Hara's character designs. This game was actually 4-player compatible, which at the time was a big deal, and immediately rendered this to be one of the best Super Nintendo games available. SNES retained the original Team Battle Royale mode of Muscle Bomber Duo. The arcade version merely used Hara's art in promotional illustrations, which disappointed a great many, but the port actually incorporated it into the game. While it doesn't pack anything extraordinary or out of the box, it does make for some thrilling cartoon brawls and excels at delivering what the formula for such wrestling games demands. The hitboxes are precise and the sprites here are huge, which complements the variety of moves that are made available to players. The sprites also allowed the team to add graphical touches unique to every character. If you need a break from intense fighting games, this is the one for you, with its smooth controls, pleasing sound and graphics, and still surprisingly brutal action. Indiana Jones's Greatest Adventures, 1994. Making use of the same engine as the Super Nintendo Super Star Wars series, this Indiana Jones title depicts the events of the first 3 films and its various levels. It puts you in the shoes of Indy himself, using your bullwhip to beat up enemies and swing around. Leaving that aside, you also find the occasional infinite ammo guns and some obviously limited grenades. With an impressive 28 areas to offer in a predominantly side-scrolling format, the game features the first 3 movies. However, only Raiders of the Lost Ark, i.e. the first, can be played when you start. The other 2 are unlocked through progression or by using a password. This one was maybe a bit too faithful to the films and failed to break new ground. While the challenge it posed was amazing, it failed to exhibit the wow factor. But unlike quite a few titles featured here, this one actually has checkpoints. The game is still known to occasionally break free from the shackles of the typical action-adventure formula and presents gamers with other forms of gameplay, like riding a minecart or flying a plane. Top Gear 2, 1993. Top Gear 2, or Top Racer 2 as the folks over in Japan called it, is a sequel to the previous game released a year before. Not much of a story here, but there are 64 tracks, and they span 16 countries. You race around to stack up some prize money and purchase upgrades like better engines, tire upgrades, vehicle armor, and transmission. Unlike quite a few games, you only have to finish in the top 10 positions to qualify for the next race. This racing game makes use of the graphics from the Lotus trilogy without making a lot of changes to their quality. What makes Top Gear 2 interesting is the inclusion of its vehicle damage mechanic. A diagram on your HUD indicates your vehicle's health. Things are quite realistic here as far as racing games go. You even have the option to switch between automatic and manual driving modes. The slower cars and strategic choice of upgrades for different driving conditions further reinforce the realism. As you drive around, you can also collect power-ups like nitro boosts or money and more. Unfortunately, the game's car configuration and upgrade system didn't live up to the hype and didn't offer all that much. Axelay, 1992. Set in a fictional galaxy known as Illis, Axelay tells the story of a peaceful planetary system that was invaded and overrun by an alien syndicate called the Armada of Annihilation. Corellis was Illis's Earth equivalent and was among the planets that the aliens had taken over. As a final Hail Mary, the D-117B fighter ship is tasked with recovering lost weaponry and stopping the invasion. The speed and pacing in Axelay's scrolling gameplay are absolutely and consistently perfect. If you're playing as a lover of the shoot-'em-up genre, you'll be able to tell that it was created by fellow admirers of the category. Konami really outdid themselves with how well balanced the movements of your ship and the enemy ships are, including their projectiles. This isn't something that can be said for all games of this kind, but it actually lets you have the much-needed breathing room without taking away from how challenging the gameplay is. Throw that in with its innovative application of Mode 7, the weapons and the game's stellar graphics, and this title will make you forget all about the learning curve that comes with its head-on perspective. Phalanx, 1992. In the year 2279, a research group sets foot on Delia, an alien planet. They colonize a part of the place, and soon, this group's security counterpart that orbits the planet notices a red alert from the land. All they can tell is that a hazardous leak is what prompted the message. Further investigation indicates an invasion by biohazardous alien life forms. You play as Wink Ballfield, the ace pilot who's sent to look into the disaster and shed light on the mysterious species behind the invasion. We'll get to the specifics in a minute, but before we do, we have to take a second to stop and appreciate the wacky cover art. This bearded old man in his hat and overalls playing the banjo is not the sole, but a major benefactor to this game's popularity. The idea was to be original, and well, it definitely was an original one. Sadly, in spite of the solid marketing effort, the game felt a little unoriginal and frustrating. The gameplay comes in to save the title and presents 3 different speeds at which the player's ship can move, allowing you to move fast enough to get past obstacles and also slow enough to swiftly dodge enemy fire. Another unique thing is the fact that your ship can take a number of hits before losing a life. Last but not least, this one offers a lot of weapons to choose from, and you can equip up to 3 of these per level. If you want a real challenge, try the funny difficulty setting by looking up the cheat code for it. Cybernator, 1993. Prequel to 1990's Target Earth, Cybernator speaks of a future where the Earth has nearly exhausted all of its fossil fuels and 2 factions, the Federation and the Axis governments, fight for control over what's left. Both these factions have taken to space and built space stations that house their deadliest weapons. You play this 2D mecha run-and gun platformer as Jake, a soldier of the Pacific States Marine Corps, and control a sweet assault suit. Though a soldier of the Federation, Jake is anything but a man of politics, and is merely a soldier following orders to survive. His platoon is charged with destroying Bildvorg, the enemy's threatening mech suit. If you look at the gameplay, Cybernator one-ups Target Earth by a landslide. The mech suit is quite fun with its dash and hover abilities, While mobile enough, the suit still feels like it has some weight to it. The weapons system could have been a tad more innovative, but the freedom that Cybernator offers in its varied and long levels is a huge redeeming quality. The environments are beautiful, and suffice to deem this game a worthy rival even to later titles, besides having a muted color palette. With multiple small sprites working together, the assault suits come to life, and every step you take convinces you of the experience. The Adventures of Batman and Robin, 1994. This title refers not to one developer's game, but to various versions of it across 5 different consoles. Konami's Super Nintendo version plays out in levels, each of which loosely follows the scripts for the animated series episodes. Fair warning about the misleading title though, Robin is not a playable character. This one was just developed before the show officially changed its title. You visit locations that call back to the show's scenes and fight crime as the Batman by night. You guide Batman to the final parts of each stage to fight a villain from the comics in this action-adventure platformer. The Batcave allows you to pick your gadgets. The lack of responsiveness in its controls and the tame fighting sequence gave the critics a lot to complain about. Still, for true fans of the comics, this game was one to adore, and it still impressed non-fans with its unique sound and pretty visuals. Illusion of Gaia, 1994. Action RPG Illusion of Gaia puts you in levels that showcase some interesting environments set in a historically fantasized version of Earth. With the easy-to-master primarily melee combat experience, you spend time roaming around, beating up enemies and collecting mystic statues to unleash an ultimate power. This one's a bit of a whimsical fever dream story surrounding its protagonist Will, along with 2 of his other forms, Frieden and Shadow. When Will finds himself in a dark room, he has an encounter with Gaia, the creator, who tells him that he possesses immense power and that he must save the world by stopping a comet. There's no currency system or things you can equip, just the 3 different sets of movement mechanics. Even the loot is lost forever once you've left a cleared area. Mostly, the game slipped by unnoticed because of the game that came before it, Soul Blazer. In comparison, this one did away with the previous one's sense of purpose. But its premise is broad, and the well-designed dungeons are plagued by supernatural creatures like vampires, evil skeletons, worms, and more. The world feels like a wilderness that can surprise you at any corner. The 3-player forms have their own unique moves and allow you to enjoy the tasteful, effect-heavy blend of classic strategy RPGs with its top-down world action as you clear stages. Draken, 1991. In the SNES version of this game, the Draconian people are living on borrowed time. 4 out of their 5 gods deem the common folk unworthy and plan on banishing them from existence. The 5th dragon god, however, was wronged by the others in their cleansing efforts and agrees to save the people's lives if 4 warriors manage to retrieve his 8 magical artifacts from the 4 elemental gods. In its sandbox world, players can be attacked at any point, even if they stay in one place. The emphasis on real-time tactics and an open-ended approach to the progression made Draken stand out with its 3-dimensional playing field. The game goes heavy on stats like health, power, defense, intelligence, agility, and more that players assign to characters with a cap and trade system. Draken's story lost its original meaning somewhere along the way because it was translated and rewritten a whole bunch of times for different versions of the game. By the end of it, what made it to the SNES version was nearly unrecognizable and pretty hard to grasp. Still, the game was innovative with its open sandbox world. Progressing wasn't monotonous or all too easy either. You had to overcome problems and solve puzzles. The graphics steal the show in this challenging and then promising title. Art of Fighting, 1992. When Yuri, the daughter of the man who created Kyokugen Karate, is kidnapped by Mr. Big, his son Ryo Sakazaki and disciple Robert Garcia are tasked with rescuing her. Ever since the release of Street Fighter II, the game's influence was felt in almost all fighting games that came after it. You can play only as Ryo and Robert in the single-player mode, but the multiplayer lets you access all 8 characters plus 2 unlockable ones. True to fighting games from that era, Art of Fighting put you up against a variety of opponents in the best 2 out of 3 matches. In addition to all their fighting styles, there was also a spirit gauge and a taunt mechanic, which tied themselves to the special attacks. Some of the designer's decisions, along with the lack of replay value and unnecessarily complicated controls, gave the Art of Fighting a bad rep, but its genius is evident in its massive sprites and thorough sound design. These give the game a nice polished look, and you'd not want to sleep on its cinematic cutscenes. This sprite scaling technique would later be used in Samurai Showdown. The taunt mechanic is a creative addition that allows you to deplete your opponent's spirit. Art of Fighting manages to breathe life into its rather basic story with these fine adjustments and qualifies as an underrated gem. Kirby's Dream Course, 1994. Kirby's Dream Course is probably the most violent mini-golf video game you'll ever find. The original plan was to release a standalone golf game called Special Tee-Shot, but when Kirby gained popularity on Nintendo, HAL Laboratory replaced the original characters and made this a Kirby game. When King Dedede steals the stars out of the night sky, Kirby takes it upon himself to restore them to nature. The story was briefly explained in a cutscene in the Japanese release, and the American version excluded this scene. You control Kirby's movements like a a golf ball, setting the angle, spin, and power of your shot to make him strike enemies scattered throughout levels while collecting stars. Kirby also possesses a copy ability that lets you turn into a tornado, a UFO, or a ball of destruction. Multiplayer mode allowed you to compete with your friends for the number of stars you could gather, and Player 2 played as Kirby, a yellow Kirby. Even though it was a Kirby game, this one packed more mechanics than most golf games did at the time. Its colourful design was offbeat, and the game had a great sense of humour. The originality alone made this one of the best Super Nintendo games, in spite of the wonky, ill-refined shot physics. It might not have been as exciting as other games on the Super Nintendo, but it was quite relaxing and fun with its music. Secret of Evermore, 1995. Square's action RPG, Secret of Evermore, tells the tale of a nameless teenage protagonist and his dog as they step out of the theater and you chase after your dog, who's chasing a cat. The chase leads to a mysterious lab, and while you inspect one of its strange-looking machines, the dog chews on some wires and ends up transporting the player, along with itself, to the world of Evermore. Evermore comprises 4 main areas, all of which are inspired by varying time periods past and those yet to come. On your quest to get back home, you engage in real-time battles, switching between the dog and the boy, who uses a sword, spear, axe, and a bazooka to fight thematically appropriate enemies. Alchemy is a prominent system, and makes Secret of Evermore stand out. While the enemy AI was simple and the battle system was a little awkward to get used to, Secret of Evermore overcomes these with its enjoyable experience. Graphics are commonly praised along with the game's alchemy aspect and the atmospheric moods. Being Square's short-lived American branch's debut game, this one did away with the Japanese art style found in other Square games and went in its own direction. Mega Man Soccer, 1994. When the evil Dr. Wily caused an explosion during a football match and unleashed his evil robot masters on the playing field, genius inventor Dr. Light, having witnessed chaos unfold on screen, sent in a few of his own heroic robot masters, led by his greatest creation, Mega Man. This soccer game lets players play not only as Mega Man, but also Proto Man and a good amount of robot masters. You can choose from one of 4 modes, including the Capcom Championship mode, exhibition matches, tournaments, and leagues. The latter 3 are quite simple, but things get interesting in the Capcom Championship mode. It has you control a team of Mega Man robots while playing against 8 teams of robot masters. After every team you defeat, one of its members joins your team, and this new character's abilities become available for use. This easy-to-play title with a top-down view of the action was flawed in that the field of view was very limited and the gameplay was fast. While it's on the nonsensical side of games, Mega Man Soccer is still an awfully fun nod to the franchise. Super Bomberman, 1993. Super Bomberman was a maze game and also an action title, but it was more maze clearing than it was action-centric. With its single-screen, non-scrolling levels, you moved horizontally or vertically across the 13 by 11 grid map, dropping bombs that destroy horizontally and vertically, while blowing up bad guys and breaking down breakable walls. Players also had to put some distance between themselves and the explosives after dropping said bombs to avoid taking damage from them. You could also blow things up in a chain reaction of bombs planted close to one another. Super Bomberman's normal mode had players progress by clearing 48 levels in 6 differently themed worlds. The battle mode, on the other hand, allowed up to 4 players with a multi-tap adapter for the extra controllers. You know a game is addictive when the critics start comparing it to Tetris. While multiplayer battle mode is the highlight, the normal mode doesn't let you down either. The goal in battle mode is to blow up opponents before the timer runs out, whereas normal is more about clearing levels spread over 6 different themes of the world and their respective enemy groups. This addictive game is arguably one of the best 4-player games that the Super Nintendo has seen. Super Adventure Island, 1992. Our next awesome but totally underrated title is Super Adventure Island, a side-scrolling platformer designed and released for the Super Nintendo. The player-controlled protagonist, Master Higgins, is enjoying a nice, peaceful evening with his girlfriend Tina when a malicious sorcerer called Dark Cloak disrupts the peace and tranquility of the mystical Adventure Island and turns Tina into stone. You must cross the sea on your journey to the legendary Ice Mountain to put the big bad in place and save Higgins' statue girlfriend. The mechanics here allow you to pick up stone axes and boomerangs and toss them at your mystic island-themed enemies as you jump from platform to platform, clearing obstacles. When you pick up the same weapon consecutively, the power of the weapon increases. This successor to the series took away your ability to run faster and replaced it with a crouch ability that allowed you to execute super jumps. Leaving the much criticized lack of fast running aside, the gameplay was similar to that of the previous one, but the Super Nintendo made it look like a much better game. The soundtrack here was a more varied one as well. X-Men Mutant Apocalypse, 1994. Mutant Apocalypse marked Capcom's entry into the X-Men franchise and had players controlling Cyclops, Wolverine, Gambit, Beast, and Psylocke in their respective levels, carrying out their assigned missions. You started this one off by clearing each character's dedicated level, and then had the freedom to choose who you controlled in the missions after that. There's a limited number of lives for all the playable characters as a whole. The story has the 5 characters on Genosha Island under Xavier's orders to free captive mutants. The plot thickens when the investigation unveils Magneto's plans to destroy the island. The mutants must now save the evil free island by fighting on Magneto's very own space station. Other than there not being enough X-Men characters and the gameplay feeling repetitive sometimes, this game was a hit. Certain critics even called it the best X-Men video game of its time. The difficulty was high, the experience had a Street Fighter feel to it, and the graphics were amazing. The focus is laid on action and combat with a balanced difficulty level, giving your characters limited set of moves. If you're a fan of the franchise, or even simply a fan of the genre it represents, Mutant Apocalypse will wow you. UN Squadron, 1991. Known in Japan as Area 88, UN Squadron was your typical side-scrolling shooter by Capcom. It did, however, break the formula that Capcom's other shooters followed in their vertically scrolling gameplay by adopting a horizontal progression style. It was based on the Area 88 manga, and you chose one of 3 mercenary pilots to play. The objective was to take to the skies and sabotage the evil plans concocted by Project 4, a radical terrorist organization. True to Capcom style, you did have a health bar, which was unique among arcade shooters of the time with their multiple reserve lives. You could also purchase extra armor and some special weapons before starting a level, and these would be refunded to your in-game resources if you left them unused. There's a lot on offer as far as customization goes. This adds a strategic value to the gameplay and, in turn, increases this one's replay value. It doesn't over-explain things and lets you figure out the kinks on your own. The fact that it didn't spoon-feed players was underappreciated and even criticized by a few, surprisingly, even 2 years after its release. Entertainment Weekly named it the 12th best game available in 1991. The levels are varied and anything but repetitive with great graphics. Shoot-'em-up fans need to try UN Squadron. Harvest Moon, 1996. Giving way to a bunch of farming simulators that would later be renamed the Story of Seasons series, Amcus released Harvest Moon. As a young man with a farm, which you inherited from your grandfather, players must restore the property and get it up and running. When you start off, the farm's in pretty bad shape, and your objective is to try and rejuvenate it. Outside of the usual farming endeavors like clearing land, planting, harvesting, and selling crops and raising livestock, Harvest Moon also has you engage in social activities like going to a bar, getting to know other villagers at festivals, and even encourages exploration, allowing you to gather resources in the wild. Though many turned their backs on this one because it seemed like a boring game where you raised animals and grew crops, Harvest Moon is greater than the sum of its parts. There's a lot more to it, and it blends RPG elements into a concept similar to that of SimCity. While a farming RPG made for a hard sell, Harvest Moon let players create their own cozy world within the game's parameters. The fun part was having complete control over your world in this original game and deciding how you spend your time. Lufia and the Fortress of Doom, 1993. Yet another first-of-its-series title, Lufia and the Fortress of Doom is an action-adventure RPG that follows 4 warriors in their quest to save the magical world of Lufia from the Sinistrals. The Sinistrals were evil but powerful entities who operated from the Fortress of Doom on a floating island, and their plan was to take over the world, claiming it for themselves. While you start off playing as 4 warriors from an earlier generation, the actual story begins 9 years later with the second Sinistral threat, when 4 other warriors rise to face the threat. The approach was a traditional one, and with the game's 2D sprites and environments, this one's graphics received a lot of praise. Looking back at it today, you can't help but admire the retro story and its characters. The nameless hero was a balanced protagonist character from a heroic bloodline. Lufia was his childhood best friend and love interest with an attitude and a talent for magic. Ogre was an army commander who relied only on brute strength and sword skills. Lastly, an agile half-elf girl called Jerin, who was the distance fighter and magical healer, completed this cast. When you put these guys together in the game's setting, the result is an immersive and fun retro game that, for a few, didn't live up to the standards set by other RPGs of the time. Ogre Battle, The March of the Black Queen, 1993. Zetaginia's unjust ruler is Empress Endora, and in the 25 years of her rule, the Liberation Army has strived to free the continent. As you get done with customizing the nameless protagonist, Ogre Battle puts you in charge of the Liberation Army and has you fight alongside many other characters. After the Empress is defeated, her wizard thug awakens a powerful creature called Demunza, powerful ogre who rules over the underworld. So, you have him to deal with next. Fun! The combination of real-time tactic elements with that of this game's RPG-like combat and story progression was a well-received one. During its series of battles, you deploy soldiers to liberate towns and defeat enemies. On the world map, you get to make adjustments to your characters, their classes and units, or even erase them altogether. After selecting your next stage on the world map, you had to take to the tactical map of the region where you deployed and commanded your units in battle. In addition to the deeply thought-out class system, there was also an alignment system that served as a determining statistic in which of your fighters were good or evil. The replay value was high with this one. You got one out of multiple different endings depending on your approach. Sadly, the small battle view and lack of direct control in its combat made it fall victim to the underrated curse. R-Type 3, The Third Lightning, 1994. With its clever level design, R-Type 3 was a side-scrolling shoot-'em-up that featured the series' then most refined weapons and charging system. As you hovered around, clearing your ship's path, you noticed how far the combat mechanics had come. In addition to the original force, it also presented players with the ability to pick one of the new Shadow and Cyclone forces, each with their unique weapon sets and fighter packs. The thing with the R-Type games was that you had to play them at a particular pace and react when the games demanded it. While this trait was a bother to quite a few people over the years, the latest game was the most promising one yet. R-Type 3 not only fixed all major flaws from the previous two games, but also expanded on their best qualities. The challenges you're faced with here are unique, and the game doesn't feel like a tedious, repetitive chore. In addition to the inclusion of checkpoints, the game looked and sounded a lot more refined than its predecessors. Its visuals made the most out of the Super Nintendo's graphic ability, including the incorporation of Mode 7. Fair warning though, it still does demand some getting used to, and rightfully so. Boogerman, a pick-and-flick adventure, 1995. The next title that managed to pick its way into our ranks is Boogerman, a pick-and-flick adventure. This 2D platformer's premise revolves around Professor Stinkbomb's genius invention that transports all pollution to another dimension, excrement, and eccentric millionaire by day, hero by night, Snotty Ragsdale, as the hero investigates to see if the machine's safe to use. During his investigation, Snotty sneezes and unintentionally opens up a portal. An arm reaches out of this portal and grabs the machine's power source. Our hero promptly jumps right into the portal with his Boogerman suit on. While the gameplay is simple, it's brought to life by Boogerman's, let's call it, unique choice of weaponry. Burps, farts, and boogers at your disposal in the fight against slimy booger-themed creatures that the excrement dimension puts you up against, and over 20 unique levels, the game manages to give players a high-quality, fun experience. Though often rejected over its juvenile sense of humor, the SNES version packed better colors, improved sound, as well as more responsive controls. Super Smash TV, 1992. Set in a dystopian at the time future in 1999, Super Smash TV's premise made the players play as contestants on a televised game show that had them shoot hordes of enemies in a kill or be killed fashion. Once you managed to clear a level in this multi-directional shooter after killing everyone else, you proceeded to the next survival round. The enemies here come in waves rather than all at once, and players can collect power-ups and gifts that give them better weapons or upgrades. The final battle even puts you face-to-face with the game show's host, before giving you back your freedom as the show's winner. Smash TV heavily drew inspiration from Stephen King's The Running Man, and the 1987 classic RoboCop, as is evident from the game's violent, dystopian sci-fi themes. Sadly, once you manage to beat this game, it starts feeling tediously monotonous. This is limited to the solo mode though. The multiplayer, which it offers the same things but for two players, is an absolute cult classic experience that you can't help but hold dear to you. Tetris Attack, 1996. Let's stop and catch a breather from all the action to look at Tetris Attack, a puzzle game for the Super Nintendo. It was first released in Japan a year prior to its American release and featured fairies in fantasy magic settings. By the time Tetris Attack made it out of Japan's borders, these fairies were replaced by characters and settings from Super Mario World 2, Yoshi's Island. Despite what the name might have you believe, this title has nothing to do with the original Tetris company or any of its video game series, other than the fact that the company gave Nintendo a license to use the Tetris name. The basic goal remains the same here. You fit blocks into vertical or horizontal rows using an on-screen cursor in an attempt to match a minimum of 3 blocks of the same color to clear lines and keep the blocks from reaching the upper limit. Tetris Attack also added a mean combo system along with chain reactions that allowed players to clear over 3 blocks in one move. Between its story, endless, timed, stage clear and puzzle modes, you had a lot of interesting takes on the classic game. The Mario cartoons did this one a great service, enhancing its graphics. Throw these things in with the player-friendly controls and you had a more fun version of Tetris, the original being something that wasn't everyone's cup of tea. Jurassic Park, 1993. Moving on, our next underrated action-adventure title takes us to Jurassic Park. For those who live without the internet and have just come out from underneath an ancient rock, this game is based on the film and novel of the same name, featuring a theme park zoo on an island where scientists have managed to genetically engineer dinosaurs. When vital computer systems fail, Dr. Alan Grant finds himself trapped on the dinosaur-filled island with a few others. The gameplay had you controlling the Doctor equipped with only a cattle prod to defend himself. As you progress, other weapons, including a tranquilizer gun, a rocket launcher, gas grenades, a shotgun, and bowlers can be used. Jurassic Park's gameplay offers two different perspectives. The first is a third-person top-down view with mazes and forests, while the other, for the interior sequences, is set in the first person. The sound effects were recorded in Dolby Surround and are often praised for Jurassic Park's varying perspectives and how the dinosaurs catch you off guard, thanks to its design. Its only faults were the lack of a password feature, along with its engaging but easy problem-solving tasks. Ys 3 – Wanderers from Ys, 1992. Ys 3 opens with the adventure-loving swordsman Adol Kristen and his friend Doji as they pass through a nameless town. While they're exploring, the pair comes across a fortune teller. Doji's curiosity gets the better of him, and he makes his way to the lady for a reading. Things are going well until the lady sees that Doji comes from the village of Redmont, and her crystal ball breaks. It seems like a bad omen to the two, and they set out for Redmont to investigate, only to end up fighting an ancient evil. This action RPG keeps things simple. While playing as Adol, you wouldn't really need anything other than his shield, armor, or sword. Magic elements were put on the back burner here, and there were these magic ring collectibles that made you hit harder, slowed down time, and strengthened your defense. This one is a little flawed in its movement mechanics. Adol moves fast and enemies appear very randomly, which means you can't always look where you're going and will die a bunch of times. Nihon Falcom's reputation for choosing excellent soundtracks is reflected here. Additionally, the cutscenes are jaw-droppingly beautiful and go well with the charming story. Lufia 2 – Rise of the Sinistrals, 1996. Remember how I mentioned that the first Lufia game, Fortress of Doom, starts off with a flashback sequence where you play as 4 warriors from an earlier generation who put an end to a Sinistral uprising? Well, the next game has you play as those warriors throughout and tells the tale of the first Sinistral uprising. You walk with an overworld map that has dungeons to clear and can have up to 4 characters in your party. The story that Rise of the Sinistrals tells is undoubtedly among the best of the era for 16-bit games. The battles are random. You encounter enemies as you explore the map, and you level up and unlock better weapons, armor, and more from the loot you gain. Other than its outstanding story, the dungeons and overall design of the game are a unique visual treat. The puzzle-heavy gameplay kept the otherwise at times tedious battles interesting. This challenging RPG made for an unforgettable experience and only faltered in its easy battles and plain sound design. Looney Tunes B-Ball, 1995. It doesn't matter if you're simply a Looney Tunes fan or just someone who likes basketball. You'll definitely enjoy shooting some hoops in this arcade-style basketball game. Only God could save you from the epic time you had playing this NBA Jam-like 16-bit title, especially if you had a multi-tap for the 2v2 matches with your friends. This retro classic gameplay was enhanced by the availability of power-ups, like the protective force field or the pies that you could throw in your opponent's faces. Hell, they even incorporated a character-specific signature move mechanic for 3-pointers that players could use if the team had enough points. While a good many were confused as to why the ball would randomly turn into a dog and start sprinting laps around the court, even when no shot clock violations were committed, Looney Tunes B-Ball was still a great SNES title. Sure, it didn't appeal to those who like playing basketball the intended way, but with 8 all-time favorite Looney Tunes characters present, user-friendly controls that even children could get the hang of, and its fluid graphics, along with the quippy special moves, this one was a gem. Captain America and the Avengers, 1993. Long before Marvel's heroes became household names in their very own cinematic universe, the Super Nintendo title had you play as Captain America, Iron Man, Vision, and Hawkeye in sabotaging Red Skull's efforts to take over the world over the duration of 5 stages. The mechanics for all your playable characters in this beat-em-up are more or less the same, with the key difference being the amount of damage each character takes when hit. Leaving hand-to-hand combat aside, you could throw things while grounded, use ranged attacks unique to every character, and even use jump attacks. There are also special power-ups that bring other Marvel heroes into the battle to assist you. The inclusion of the game's flying shooter sequences was a creative one that really enhanced the gameplay on this one. Captain America and the Avengers went a long way to please Marvel fans as it put you face-to-face with infamous foes from the universe. The game's challenging difficulty, however, was a double-edged sword, as it made defeating even relatively weaker foes like Claw and the Living Laser with their silly visual effects a struggle. But this was also one of the best parts of the game. EVO. Search for Eden, 1992. EVO places the theories of evolution and the mythological Garden of Eden as its plot devices, while giving a whole new meaning to fantasy. The concept goes, the sun tells Gaia on Mother Earth that she's special, that she can support life as we know it. The catch is that in order to become home to an intelligent, evolved species, she must host the trail that is the survival of the fittest. Within these settings, players start off as fish, exploring the planet and defeating enemies to gain strength as a means to evolve. The end goal is to turn into a stronger, complex life form worthy of standing by Gaia's side in the Garden of Eden. Taking the form of a side-scrolling platformer, EVO had players bear witness to 5 different geological periods that span over 1 billion years. This game is as original as it gets. Sure, the gameplay is sluggish at times and the music could have been a lot better, but this EVO is a soothing experience. You couldn't help but applaud its creativity as you turn from a cute fish into a hilariously bizarre creature. Tiny Toon Adventures – Buster Busts Loose, 1993. Our next game is a Konami project for the Super Nintendo that was based on Tiny Toon Adventures, the animated TV show. This adventure stars the titular Buster Bunny across the game's 6 levels, or 5 if you were playing it on children difficulty settings. Each level made you complete various objects as Buster. The range it showed was crazy. One level had you feeding Dizzy, the Tasmanian devil, to save the school kitchen, while another put you face to face with Duck Vader. This hop and bop platformer was a long hard look at everything a platformer should be. In spite of that, it remains a long overlooked and underappreciated title. This might be due to its weak control responsiveness or the lack of challenges that it shows. However, when you consider the availability of characters from one of your favorite childhood TV shows in its various themes and level designs, you find a bold platformer that doesn't shy away from breaking the formula. The Seventh Saga, 1993. With an impressive 7 characters to choose from, the Seventh Saga follows a setting where the king summons his 7 hero apprentices to present them with a challenge. The king promises to name one of the 7 his successor in ruling the world, but in order to determine which of the 7 becomes the heir to the throne, he has them embark on a quest to obtain 7 runes of power that were once used to defeat the evil Gorcia. The one who gathers all runes would go on to rule the world. There were 3 modes to the gameplay. In safe areas, as your chosen protagonist, you could move around freely for as long as you wanted. This was where your NPC interactions took place, and you could even buy or sell items. The second gameplay style was what you witnessed in an enemy-infested area. In these areas, a radar appeared on your HUD, allowing you to spot enemies, dungeons, runes, and cities. If any of said enemies made it to you, a battle would break out. During these turn-based battles, you had the option to attack, defend, use items, cast spells, or run away. Unfortunately, the combat sequences felt like a chore, since the frequently encountered enemies were very similar in terms of their tactics. The dialogue was limited, so the story didn't get the telling it deserved. Still, Seven Saga's Mode 7 effects and non-linear approach managed to leave their mark and make it worthy of a second glance. The Lost Vikings, 1993. When the 3 Vikings, Eric the Swift, Olaf the Stout, and Baliog the Fierce are abducted by Croutonian aliens and thrown in an intergalactic zoo under the orders of Tomator, the alien empire's ruler, they manage to break free from the spaceship, but find themselves stuck in a different time period. Here begins their quest to take down the Croutonian overlord and return home. Along the way, they're tossed into various periods of time and must cover strange grounds to find their way back. With each Viking's unique skills, players controlled one at a time in guiding their characters from the level's entrance to its exit while clearing character-specific obstacles and enemies. This platformer allowed you to switch characters in its puzzling levels and approach levels in the way you deemed fit. This was an innovative approach to puzzle solving at the time and was applauded for mixing a sense of humor to the role-playing. The music and sound here weren't anything special, but they got the job done while the challenge on offer, sharp controls and addictive gameplay stole the show. Gogo Ackman, 1994. Developed and published by Banpresto, Gogo Ackman was based on the short-lived manga series of the same name that was created by the legendary artist who created Dragon Ball Z. As a demonic child, it agrees with every fiber of his being that Ackman kills people with the goal of harvesting their souls to sell to the king of all demons. He's followed by a flying red minion devil who collects the souls of the enemies that he defeats. While you mostly punch your way through this one, you also pick up guns, swords, sharp boomerangs, and bombs. Collecting 100 souls meant gaining an extra life. Other than running around and jumping your way through its side-scrolling levels, you even played sequences where Ackman got into a bunch of cool vehicles like cars or strange helicopters and hovering jetpacks. Talk about range. When you put all these ingredients in the pot with large, detailed character sprites that go with the game's colourful environments and responsive controls, you have on your plate the delicious, masterfully cooked meal that was Gogo Ackman. Its only fault was that the game was fairly easy, but the awesome art style alone could make you forget all about that. Pirates of Dark Water, 1994. Based on the fairly decent 1991 show that aired for 2 seasons, Pirates of Dark Water was a beat-em-up title that bore a lot of resemblance to Final Fight in terms of how it looked and its gameplay. Pirates of Dark Water stars 3 playable characters. Ren is the prince of a once well-to-do kingdom who serves as the character with balanced stats. Tula is an adventure-seeking ecomancer who becomes your fast-moving, agile character, whereas Ayos is a heavily slow pirate rogue who's there for the treasure. You could choose to play as either of the 3 in the fight against Bluth's gang and the quest to save the world from the mysterious Dark Water. Each character here had a special desperation attack along with their blocking ability, in addition to various combat mechanics. The combo system was quite interesting too, and surprised those who dared to experiment with their attacks. Sadly, the variety in the combat didn't extend to the rest of the experience, like enemy design and the game's 8 stages. Nevertheless, for those seeking retro thrills or a worthy complement to the show, or even a fun 2-player co-op experience, Pirates of Dark Water was a must-try. Marvelous verdict, be it old and forgotten classics or hidden gems that never got the recognition they deserved, today's video has been a testament to the sheer diversity and innovation that these Super Nintendo titles packed. Through our list of mesmerizing RPGs, thrilling platformers, mind-bending puzzlers and more, we hope that we were able to provoke within your heart the urge to take a nostalgic trip back to the 90s, to explore or revisit the rich experiences that SNES titles opened you up to. We hope that this video served its purpose in highlighting the brilliance of the Super Nintendo as a console. It doesn't matter if you're a long-time Nintendo enthusiast or simply a newcomer looking to explore the retro side of things. These games are an important part of our gaming community's history and deserve to be talked about even more today than they were talked about at the times of their respective releases. Thanks for watching and stay tuned for more.